Hi, everyone. Welcome to episode 2 of AI and Business Strategy. We're talking today about vibe coding. I'm joined with my co-hosts Josef and Igor, who will introduce themselves, and then I will introduce myself and we'll begin. Igor, did you want to start?
Yeah. So my name is Igor. I am a co-founder of Corsac Technologies. We do modernization and software development. We've been on the market for about 17 years now.
Awesome. And Josef?
Yeah, I'm Josef. My name is Josef Dietl. I'm a founder of ProDigiPar. We're on the market for 5 years now, and so far we've done ERP consulting, and now we are changing into the AI world.
Awesome. I'm Sheikh. I was formerly an AI consultant and a data scientist, and now I help businesses scale with AI. Today we're talking about vibe coding, something we're all intimately involved with in terms of either running programming projects or writing our own code. And we've all seen the power and benefits of vibe coding, but what has, I think, been underappreciated so far is the costs of it and the hidden costs. Because as people who are coming from the software development world, we know that most of the cost of a project happens after the initial development, i.e., in the maintenance part of it, and the costs of maintaining bad software. And we're going to talk about both the upsides and opportunities and where vibe coding should be used, but also some of the downsides and precautions that businesses should be taking when trying to save short-term costs for much bigger long-term costs. And that includes cybersecurity concerns. So I'm very excited about this, gentlemen. We're going to let's dive in. Does anybody want to set the stage for us about what vibe coding is and how people are using it today?
I think what most people think vibe coding is you sit down, tell an AI, write me a program to do X. The AI writes a program to do X, and everybody's happy. So it's kind of the philosopher's stone of software development. And as you've already alluded to, Sheikh, the truth is a bit more differentiated than that.
Yes. Igor, I know that in your company there are many developers, some of whom are using vibe coding, but not everybody likes it. Can you talk about that?
Yes, absolutely. We've been playing with vibe coding for maybe half a year, maybe a little more. And as of now, I can certainly say that people generally do not like it. So the developers who have experience and who usually know what they're doing, they tend not to like the code generated by various code generation tools, because though this code can be so-called well documented and seems like it should be easy to find stuff there, but they tend to actually struggle with that a lot, first of all. Second, they don't like the fact that it's very much unpredictable. Yeah, it's the question of how you create the prompt. It's the question of being experienced with a certain tool, obviously. But overall, they still get very unexpected bugs, very unexpected solutions in the code, and they struggle to deal with that. And the main concern which they have is, apart from being unpredictable, it's also difficult to maintain that code and especially do whatever fixes they need to do during the deployment. Because when they do the deployment, they need to normalize the system, they need to do some fixes, and when you know the code, when you created that code, it's usually easy to find stuff, and you know how it works. When you don't know the code that well, and you did not create it, and it's vibe coded, the issues take absolutely unpredictable amount of time. So though it helps to set up the stage for the project, let's put it that way, and create something fast and something that seems to be working on the surface, when you actually take that code and get it to the stage of deployable production code, what we've seen so far, it doesn't actually take less resources on average. It pretty much takes very comparable amount of time, and moreover, it takes more time when you deploy and when you need to do any fixes. More time for sure.
Yeah, and the way to understand it from my perspective is what AI is really good at is sounding and looking like it's human, because what it's trying to do is generate similar text, i.e., produce things that look like other things that are similar in that context. Okay?
Mhm.
Just because, and we know that the complexity of programming is not in the syntax of the code, or the choice of words, or the arrangement of the punctuation or something. The hidden nuance in code is in the logic, and the logic for two different pieces of code, you could change one letter, one character, one number, and have very different logic, right?
Yeah.
And this is the important thing. Just like in mathematics, programming has very, very important words that have strong sense of meaning and have downstream and upstream effects. And those are not appreciated by a statistical predictor, which is just trying to look and sound like it sounds like it. Which is why AI, first of all, cracked language, because human language is fairly loose and it can sound like it's saying something in language. But if you actually paid attention to early versions of AI, what it said didn't really make sense. And even today, if you ask it to tell you a joke, the jokes don't really work. Because to tell a good joke, you need to understand a lot of unstated things about social norms. You need to understand a lot of unstated things about what's going to, like what are typical assumptions, or what's something that everybody knows is true, but nobody can say it in a way that makes it fun. Like, there's all this embedded stuff that's not obvious just in the words and characters that are present. So it's really about what's hidden. So two pieces of code can look very similar and behave very differently, and one of them is going to be much better. And AI is particularly bad at that. Now we're working on solving that, and there's advanced techniques on solving that. But for the time being, as Igor was saying, a lot of times it makes things that look right and feel right, but the way it's the underlying structure, the foundation, it's like a house that's been well painted, and the windows are and the doors and everything looks good. But actually, the infrastructure and the foundations are really not making sense. And the probability of the whole thing collapsing, especially if you need to build an apartment complex on top, is very high.
Yeah.
Well,
It does not understand the context of the project. That's how they call it essentially. And
yeah,
you can actually help it understand the context of the project through proper prompting, but it's still a chance. It's you're like literally throwing a dice and see what happens. And this is a pretty annoying process, first of all. Second, it takes time and resources, and humans tend not to like that approach. So that's what we have.
I think what is happening is when you, one of the things that I saw when I was with SAP's architecture group, we were working mostly on identifying the non-functional requirements. So if you write a piece of code, if you have to fulfill a job in an IT system, there is infinite amount of ways how to handle a handful of functional requirements. But the moment you start to introduce non-functional requirements like performance or scalability or proper error management, robustness against error situations, usability, security, and all these things, the moment you start to make these non-functional requirements explicit, with every non-functional requirement, you cut the allowed solution space in half. So when you start thinking about vibe coding from that angle, the system is, as you said, Sheikh, the system is creating things that are similar to what it already knows. Now, it doesn't make sense to recreate something that is already there. We already have a functionality in IT that is called copy that does exactly that. So the entire point is vibe coding needs to adapt common patterns to a new situation. Now, if frame the prompt in such a way that it picks up the common patterns that we already know from requirements engineering, if we are moving in a space that is well known and common, and if we are good at expressing the non-functional requirements properly, then the entire vibe coding building starts to become a bit more deterministic. it is still something a good programmer is never going to like, because, I mean, honestly, I've met 1,000 programmers in my life, and nobody liked anybody else's code as much as vibe coded code. So that's just a law of nature. It doesn't work.
Right.
You never
Right.
like the code somebody else has written.
Yes.
But by getting the requirements, particularly from the angle of this is a pattern that you already know, by staying in a space that is known, and by making the non-functional requirements explicit, you can make a significant progress on that front. That works. And the other thing that you need to do is you need to keep the chunks that are vibe coded. You need to keep them small and compact. If you go into a huge system like, I don't know, hundreds of thousands of lines of code, I don't think vibe coding is going to work there. If you manage to carve out a piece of, let's say, 1,000 lines of code, or ideally 500, then you start to you get to make real progress.
Yeah, and by the way, that takes us to what we were discussing last time, Shake, when we spoke that it turned out that to do proper vibe coding, you actually need a senior developer instead of junior developer, because
Yes.
the main goal of the person is to architect the system in such a manner that it will incorporate the vibe coding practices properly, and only the person with lots and lots of experience can do that, which again poses the question of resources. Like many people consider that with such a cool tool as code generation, whatever tool, a junior developer will take and it will up his coding skills, but that's not what happens. You actually need a senior guy who will make sense of vibe coding code, who will be able to put it all together properly, and who will take to account the limitations of that code generation tool when building the system, which makes the price of such a specialist actually higher. So if you wanted to get someone cheaper, no, that's not how it works. So you will actually pay more for such a specialist than you expected.
Yeah. And something interesting is going to happen many years down the road, because how do you become a senior developer today? You become a senior developer today by doing the stuff that we are doing with vibe coding today under the
Exactly.
supervision of a senior developer. But now, if the senior developers do all of their stuff with vibe coding instead of with junior developers, we're going to run out of senior developers in the foreseeable future.
That's absolutely right. That's absolutely right.
Yeah, and I think that the whole world of coding will change, right, in relation. I think seniority is very important, but I think ability to come up with good system design and good architecture is learned to a certain degree. But I also think, you can have young developers who are quite good at it, with a little bit of training, and you can have experienced developers who are not good at it. So I think that this idea that like we can reduce our hiring and we can not bring in like junior developers because it costs money, and why do we have to pay this junior person when AI can do it? I think that is going to cost companies in the long term because they will not have a talent pipeline, and the talent pipeline may change, it may shrink, but it's crucial that that talent pipeline is maintained, in my opinion.
It's the question of that every professional needs to know the basics and needs to go the path of covering all the basics that are important for that subject matter. You cannot have a good boxer who does not have a proper stance and who cannot do 1-2 properly. You cannot just start teaching him combinations. You must start with the basics. That's the same stuff with the developers. You need to have junior developers sitting with senior guys, and senior guys showing them the crappy mistakes they're making. This is inevitable. If we don't do it, again, this is absolutely right that we will run out of senior experienced people, and we'll have lots of people with very specific skills in vibe coding, and then in 5 or 10 years you'll pay enormous amount of money for people doing some middle developer stuff because no one else can do it now, something like
And
that.
I think that is going to be the talent pipeline, as you call it, Shake, I think is going to become an absolutely critical and universal term in the AI age. Because more or less the entire discussion that we're having now, I've repeated on Monday when I spoke with a friend on accounting. Accounting is going to be, we started with accounting. Accounting is very much every single digit. If you're off by one digit, accounting is out the window, very much like programming languages. You can do proper accounting AI based if you are staying within certain well-defined scopes and within certain compartments. And then the AI is going to do 90%, 95%, 97% of the trivial stuff. And then you will need a very, very, very senior person first in order to direct the AI, and then to pick up the stuff that the AI couldn't do. Which means that in the accounting space, we're going to see exactly the same development. We will need somehow to manage a talent pipeline from a junior accountant to a senior accountant, in much the same way as we've just discussed it in development. And I wonder whether that is a universal pattern that is emerging as AI is conquering more and more different industries.
Yeah, I've noticed across the board that people are trying to cut costs by not hiring entry level. But I think that's not the right look. I don't think you're going to have a huge competitive advantage by having a 10% less headcount. Okay, that may translate to a 3% cost reduction net, right? But it's also going to reduce your competitive flexibility and that like because AI is increasing uncertainty about what the strategic direction of businesses is, you actually want more strategic flexibility. So by cutting your talent pipeline, you're significantly reducing not only your strategic flexibility today, but in 3 to 5 years, when that early talent would have gotten some experience and would be able to contribute more, you're not going to have that, right? So that's a significant impediment to what your organization is able to do or not do. So those are things that I think have not been accounted for and should be accounted for. So those are things that hopefully there will be some improvement. And I think that we should really continue moving that process forward. So I think instead of cutting costs, the idea should be, hey, let's maybe focus our hiring more on like generalists who are more capable, or let's hire less people, but let's go for talent that has more more potential in according to some measures, and let's focus on finding strategic clarity with AI, and then we'll know what the next important moves are. Because I think it doesn't take much brain power to think, oh, like AI can do some work, let's cut some people. And I think the costs of that are actually enormous, because suddenly you have no ability to move direction in your company. And if crucial people leave, you can't replace them.
I think you've touched on another really interesting point, and that is the shift from specialist to generalist. What is starting to emerge is that a generalist and a good AI can move mountains, whereas 5 years ago, you would have needed a bunch of specialists to move the same mountain. And now you can move with a bunch of specialists, you can move one mountain, and you can move it from left to right, and you can move it back from right to left. But if you want to move a different mountain, you need a different bunch of specialists. And that is one of the biggest changes I see coming in the AI age, that a good generalist, or maybe two or three, can move many mountains in any direction you want if they have good AI support. So whereas a few years ago, the value of a good specialist with that famous T profile was very high, and the value of a generalist was relatively low. Now, I think this is going to flip. We're going to see a significant how do you call it, appreciation of generalists if these generalists figure out how to handle AI stuff good.
That's important. So it can be a generalist, but the generalist needs to have domain expertise. So it can be a generalist in writing software if they've been a software architect for a long time. They understand design, like they understand trade-offs, design decisions, all sorts of things. I do not think that you want a generalist, i.e., somebody who took English literature, coming in and writing your software for you because they can vibe code it. So I think that distinction of like, yes, you want a generalist, but that generalist has to understand that domain space broadly and big picture wise, and also know how things are supposed to work together. I think that generalist is at a premium. But a generic generalist is, I think, actually even still getting devalued more because they're not really better than the models themselves. Like they're like, how much know-how can they add to what the models can do out of the box to really add value, right?
But by the way, we specific like a little bit to this side about the generalist when we are doing some modernization projects, we often face the problem that the software was written in a very old version of certain code language, or maybe it was written in a coding language that we don't even have specialists in, and we need to make sense of it. And this is something that AI actually helps a lot and is very efficient with.
Yeah.
Right now, like if in the past I literally had to hire a person to help to make sense of a certain code, now I don't need, and I have the like senior guys. They can just use AI tools to make sense of whatever coding language, and then they proceed with their regular coding language, and it helps a lot.
Yeah. I remember 20 years ago, we were offered a so-called code comprehension framework, an unbelievably expensive piece of software, which had the sole purpose of understanding a piece of code that somebody else had written. Now that is a niche AI can really help.
Yeah.
You can, I mean,
Yeah.
it's an interesting contribution, and then you can still figure out how you want to solve that I hate everybody else's code problem.
Yeah, in fact, AI is a great translator between people. So if you give it a 200 page documentation and ask it to pull out the important parts, it's going to do a great job for you, right? And if you tell it specifically, how do I do this, this, and this in this library, and you paste in the documentation of the library, AI is actually going to be doing a really good job of helping you. It has this mechanism called attention, which actually makes it very good at pointing out what's important given what we're trying to achieve. And AI is also good for, again, not only translating languages, but also code styles and things like that. So if you ask it, preserving the logic, translate the code from this style to this style, it can do a good job if you use an advanced thinking model. And that's actually very useful because in an organization, if you have, 50 developers, each with their own code style, you can get something that's hard for people to talk to. And if AI can create like universalize that, like when the developer has figured out the hard logical part, or they've figured that out with the AI, and there is cohesion, I think AI can actually sort of, like they have in every organization, typically they have like a linting format, like different ways to format code to make it uniform. I think AI can also take that to another level. So I think AI is not just good as a replacement for what, the joke used to be a few years ago, a programmer, what do? They get paid to like Google questions on the internet, right? They'd go to this website called Stack Overflow. And now Stack Overflow has been replaced by AI. In fact, we've seen it really fall off. And many companies, there was another company called Gartner, which was in consulting, it's used for a lot of information, and they had an 80% drop in their stock price or something because people are not getting it. They're just using AI to tell them the same information or using deep research. So increasingly, I do think it has a very, very important interfacing, translation, interpretation layer. And I think that's also underappreciated at the moment.
And by the way, that's when you're speaking about people asking AI about some professional information shared by a certain company, that poses an interesting question. But very often, people are not looking for the right answer; they're just looking for the best fitting answer. And like that company probably provides way better information, and that company's information is probably way more reliable. But for the absolute majority of people, this is just not necessary. They are completely fine with whatever ChatGPT will tell them, and if it sounds good enough, they will accept it. And ChatGPT basically its main goal is to tell you something that you like, because even if it's bullshitting you and you are pointing this out, and or vice versa, it will, at the end of the day, it will just adjust to your request to tell you something you like. That's it.
Yeah,
And
but what I'm hearing is Pareto principle all over the place.
yeah, exactly.
Pareto
Can
principle,
you
where people
elaborate
want.
on that in the context of this?
Yeah, let's take what Igor just said backwards. AI is just bullshitting you. They're telling you what you want. So if you want to have deep information and you go through the effort of kicking your AI into providing reliable information, you can actually achieve that within reasonable limits. But most of the time, people get 80% information because that is what they're satisfied with. But the catch is, if you have kind of a conversation, let's call the following figurative math, a metaphorical math. If you have an 80% information quality on the one side and an 80% information quality on the other side, then the total is going to be only 60%. So we're going to likely going to see a decline in general information literacy.
yeah,
So
and it's
when
also
go
yeah.
ahead.
So go on.
So uh, when you want to have Gartner level information, you should best go to Gartner because that is what they're good at. But honestly, I'm not going to Gartner many times because most of the time, what I really need is good enough information, Pareto level information, and not that additional 10% on top of the 80% that I get from ChatGPT. That I would get from that I could get from Gartner, but I would have to pay Gartner for the 90% and not just for the 10% on top. And that,
Yeah, and it's also the question of efforts, because right now you can get all this 80% of information so easy,
yeah,
just literally in a matter of several seconds, and which takes us to the remaining 20% information. Now it's the same Pareto principle. Now you need to take 80% of efforts, but with regards to how let's say ChatGPT UI is easy to use, it's actually not 80%, actually way more time. Now, in order to get those remaining 20%, you actually need to spend like 95% more. And you're just not going to do that in the absolute majority of cases, and people will just be happy with whatever is given to them. I can give you example from my company specifically about that. I have people applying on Upwork, and ChatGPT writes wonderful applications on the projects on Upwork if you give it a proper prompt. And now that's everything that person needs to do. He just needs to write a prompt and ask ChatGPT to write this application. Yeah, maybe they will later make some minor changes, but they will not make substantial changes, because whatever they see there, they would be happy about. First of all, it did 80% of their work. Second, it took so little effort, because before that they needed to spend like 15-20 minutes to write a proper response. Now they just literally copy paste it to the prompt, to the same conversation with ChatGPT, and it works. It's fine. So it's not only the question of quality, it's the question of effort and human it's human nature. Like when you see that you can get 80% with so little effort, you will be completely happy about it.
yeah. Let's build on that example. Um, what where do you create more value? If you have one Upwork application that is 95% quality by whatever measure, or if you have 5 Upwork applications that have 80% quality,
Yeah,
who's
that's a
creating
very
more
good
value?
question. Yeah, exactly.
And there
That's a
are
very good
corners
question.
where the 95% application is efficient. It is
Yeah.
well used resources. And
Yes.
there are, but the majority of cases is 5 times 80% beats 1 time
Yeah,
95%.
Yeah, well, it
exactly.
depends. It depends on how, like, it depends, right? Like, if you're making a YouTube video, for example, if you make 5 videos that are 80% quality, that gives you an advantage in terms of topics of the videos. You can do more topics. And then it gives you a disadvantage on a comparative metric of other videos that have been made on that subject. You're going to be performing worse. Whereas if your video is doing very well on just one topic, and that topic happens to not be too unpopular, then your video will do much better compared to competition, because every percentage of improvement means way more. So the difference between a video at a 98% versus a 99% is massive. The difference between a video at 10% to 20% is negligible, because both the videos suck. Nobody's going to watch them. YouTube's not going to distribute them. So marginal improvements are very worth it in domains where there's a strong power law distribution effect in terms of like concentration of wealth, for example, right? The better you are playing the wealth game, the marginal improvements there create huge ramifications for you. Whereas if you're really bad at the money game, you're going to keep losing, which is why, again, 99% of businesses fail or whatever, right? That's partly because they're not good enough to really be competing. And so they're like, it doesn't matter if you're at the 30th percentile or the 60th percentile, you're probably just going to go out of business either way. You have to be the top 1 to 5% to stay alive. And so I think in RFPs and proposals, because it's competitive, if 100 people are submitting a bid and yours is stand out better, you will be more likely to land it. Whereas if 3 people are submitting, it's better to submit on 5 projects at 80%, because you just get more eyeballs.
Yeah, it's
Honestly,
also the question. It's also the question of scarcity
Yeah.
and of the volume. So that's why AI is used for automation. Like if you have incredibly big volume, you can be happy with 80%, because having 80% on each item and increasing the volume with AI will give you way more than if, for example, you only have 10 items available and you have 80% of them. And so when you have, let's say on Upwork, you have only 10 projects available and you have the time to apply on them, you want to apply on each one of them as good as you can. But if you have more projects than you can apply on, then you're using AI. Because now 80% will actually give you a much bigger chance. Because if you can apply on 100 projects instead of 10 projects, you'd rather go with 100 projects at 80% than with 10 projects at 95%. Something like that. So
and we need,
that's the question of the market.
and there is one thing that is we would need to look closer at what we understand from under quality. What is quality? You have mentioned, Sheikh, you will need to write a proposal that stands out. Now, a proposal can stand out in terms of, let's say, cosmetics, and it can stand out in terms of substance.
Yes, of course.
Of course, you want to have the proposal that has the best. I mean, 5 years ago, you wanted to have the proposal that stands out on cosmetics, actually. I mean, look at all the hundreds of pieces of advice for writing a good investor pitch deck. It really doesn't have much to do with what your company does. It's all about presentation. And now, funny enough, with AI, the whole thing can turn upside down if the person you're addressing your proposal to is using AI as well. But still, we're talking Pareto principle in, Pareto principle out. If you have a Pareto principle based AI as the main audience of your proposal, they're going to fish out the stuff that is on top of the distribution for your audience. And all the nuances are going to go away. And everybody's just talking about promises. I can promise the world to you. And the question of where is your ability to execute is an entire different question anyways.
Absolutely.
So
And I think a really good example of this is actually if you're building a product company, right? Like you're building an app or something, or you're building like a SaaS, especially if it's B2C. Marginal, like this is why they tell you to focus in business, because marginal improvements really count when it's a B2C product, whether it's a piece of content or software. In B2B, it's a complex matching problem. In B2C, it's not a complex matching problem. You have a simple solution for a lot of people, and that solution should be really good, and it should be marketed heavily, right? So most consumer apps, like you look at Facebook or Instagram, or you look at Uber, or you look at you look at Google, like they're all very simple for the user. And Google won because it was a much better search engine because of the PageRank algorithm. So, and Gmail won because again it was a better and cleaner email client. So in B2C, marginal improvements really matter. In B2B, because you're dealing with a lot of uncertainty and unknown, you can over optimize on one area, but it's actually not a good fit for whatever reason because there's a lot of unknowns. So in B2B, where there's complex matching, you actually want to take many more shots at goal. And whichever goal you're closest to hitting, that's where you should then optimize. So I think that explore exploit looks different. For both, you need explore exploit. I think for B2C, once you know an area works, like you really have to focus. And for B2B, I think you always have to work with the fact that on the other side there can be a lot of variables, and speed and volume are very, very important to adjust for that.
Still tells us one shot 95% or 5 shots 80% may still be is still up in the open. I mean, if you're smart about it, you go 5 shots at 80% and treat it as an A/B test.
Exactly. Yeah. And that's the thing with AI. You don't have to take 5 shots. You can take 5,000.
Yeah.
Yeah, exactly.
And then the top 10, you can go 95%. And now you've got 10 at 95, or you take one at 95 and then the next. But yeah, I think that's where AI's power is if you can give it certain templates and structures to do certain things. And if you've got AI that's great, right? But people still don't believe you, right? Because AI is not enough to actually deliver solutions. Like you need credibility in addition to, so AI can give volume at quite a good quality, but you need reputation in addition, and brand, and you need some sense of really standing out in your messaging, relating to customers, and most importantly, your credibility and trust. Because AI, again, it reduces the barrier to entry to, if people didn't have adequate English, they couldn't really compete with you in a proposal because their proposal wouldn't sound correct, right? But now nobody has a broken English problem if they use AI. So suddenly the competition goes up incredibly. And even if you don't know much about it, the other thing was industry knowledge. You might know a lot about an industry. With AI, if you're intelligent, you can get the 80-20 of an industry's knowledge and some of the core problems pretty fast and easily. So that is also what used to be a moat and competitive advantage that's gone. So really the thing that's continued to remain is trust, credibility, and brand. And then but the AI equalizes a lot of the other things. It's just with resumes, a lot of people can have very similar looking resumes that are very similar quality with AI. So it's no longer like your attention to detail is not apparent as well in your resume anymore. Who you are doesn't come across it. So there are other ways, other indicators that will become more important. So for companies that are in the B2B space or even the B2C space, I think getting brand, getting credibility are crucial pieces of remaining competitive and ahead of the others.
By the way, this 80 and 95% rule takes us back to the idea of a generalist and of an auto specialist. Because now you need a generalist to set it up for 80%, and you need an auto specialist to set it up for 95 or 99%. And which is, by the way, very much comparable, which means that crappy specialists will not be necessary. And the mid-level of specialists will struggle often finding proper positions because now the generalists can do their work with, let's say, AI at 80%, which is good enough, but they are not yet good enough to be that 99%. And it's absolutely the same thing which happened to lots of services when web tools for, let's say, legal documents generation appeared. Like before that, you had lots of smaller legal companies who were living on creating small documents, and now you just buy a subscription for $15, and you can get all those legal documents generated for you for $15 a month, essentially. And you don't pay anything. And all those legal companies who did not have those top tier specialists, they just go out of business because there's now nobody needs their services essentially. So
Yeah.
that's kind of comparable situation.
That's exactly. You need somebody who's a generalist in the sense that they understand the domain. They don't understand just one part. They understand the domain quite well, so they
Yeah.
can put the parts together. But they need to be they need to be exceptional in that domain. So you need to be exceptional in the legal domain and understand law, like maybe it's contract law, maybe it's corporate law very well. And then you can use AI to really scale yourself up as an expert, and the AI can do more of the specialized things. But if you yourself are like if you're a paralegal or legal assistant and you're like, yeah, I'm a generalist, like I was a legal assistant at this law office, I helped every lawyer with, you're not that useful because you don't know enough to be useful. So I think it's there are two kinds of generalists. There are generalists who don't know much, and then there's generalists who know a lot of the domain. They're not specialized, but they are very deep in that domain. Those kinds of generalists are I think, the most valuable asset today.
Yeah, but inside of that frame, there is that question, how far can you go if you're not a specialist in what you're trying to do, but you're extremely good at acquiring knowledge and kicking the AI into gear? There is that example from the guy I think he was in Toronto actually, who created a nuclear fusion reactor on his kitchen table. He was a math student. He didn't know anything about soldering. He didn't know anything about physics. He didn't know anything about vacuum technology. But a lady seems to have piqued his motivation. By the way, he also didn't know much about radioactivity detection, and he created his own neutron detectors. And over the course of, if I followed the project correctly, about 6 weeks, he acquired all the knowledge that he needed. He figured out all the data sheets of all the machinery that he needed. He picked up some crappy stuff from a junkyard and pumped it up so that it actually fulfilled the purpose. And for everything that I could follow about the project from here, he managed to create nuclear fusion on his kitchen table within 6 weeks, because he's really, really, really good. Well, first of all, he was really motivated. He's really good at acquiring knowledge, at tapping into knowledge sources all over the place, at pimping solutions that were in a way that they really weren't meant to be used. And as the glue of bringing everything together on top of conventional knowledge sources, of friends and mentors, of people allowing him to use their tools and teaching them how to, for example, solder, he could do something that I wouldn't have, that I still can't get my head around that it worked.
Yeah, I mean, there's somebody who did that 9 years ago that I found on Reddit also. That was before AI. So
Yeah,
there
yeah.
have been people who have been working on these sorts of ideas. Obviously, what he built in his bedroom and whether he could go work at a nuclear fusion company and actually be useful are two different knowledge spaces. Now, he's shown an ability to learn very fast. And I think somebody high agency who can learn very fast is great. The problem with this kind of learning is that you cannot actually validate it yourself, right? Now,
Yep.
since he's building a real thing, it's a little bit easier to have steps and check those steps and over time. But I can bet that the way he's built it is not that fruitful for a scalable solution. Like I don't think I could build a little computer or something with some things, and it would look very creative and very interesting. But what TSMC does in their fabrication process, I don't think I would approach any. I don't think I'd begin to approximate anything that would really even apply there much. So I don't know where he lands in between those two things, but I think it's closer on the side of I built my own computer. using some electrical circuits, then I can now go work at TSMC and be very useful. I'm sure he could work at TSMC because he's got the ability to learn, and the experts can teach him what he needs to know. But if you don't have senior generalist experts who are able to, and specialists who are able to teach a person like this, in addition to the AI, I don't think I don't think he would be able to create TSMC on his own. Let me put it that way.
I agree.
From AI knowledge that he can derive, or its equivalent in nuclear fusion. I think if he could not talk to any human experts, only AI, I do not think he'd be able to create a nuclear fusion company.
Yeah, but there are fun spaces there. I don't know, 10 years ago, I met a company in Munich. They were making class 3 medical devices, brain surgery devices, and they were using standard parts from a Best Buy level consumer electronics for the positioning of the operation table for brain surgery. And the whole trick that they brought about was to calibrate consumer level devices so that you have sub-millimeter precision in the positioning of the table. So if you're going into crazy spaces like that, then the ability of that nuclear fusion guy is invaluable.
Yeah,
And
but sorry, go on.
go ahead.
Okay.
I was just about to say the same thing again.
Yeah. So it by the way, it poses the question of what hyper intelligent people can do now. Because the better tools you have, the better you can excel at something, right? If you are hyper intelligent. And in this situation, what we see is the guy who has the necessary knowledge and necessary tools to create managed to create something that took like decades of scientists' work and way more resources. But he did have access to the necessary knowledge, and he did have access to the necessary tools. And by the way, Sheikh, like you have your friend, I don't remember his name, which has this AI SEO marketing agency, and who basically does all the work himself for what even a few years ago he needed lots of people to do. So now you have the tool for hyper intelligent people to create way more value, which increases the range between what an average person can do and a hyper intelligent person can do. Something like that, which is a very dark question. What are we going to do about that?
Yes. I was actually writing a piece about this that I did not publish. So I think the biggest challenge we're going to have is people who become cyborgs in the future by using very advanced AI to start to construct, they could start to construct bionics at some point, body parts. But at some point, they'll create their own brain chips and upgrade their own brains, right? Obviously, brain chips, Neuralink is already making, Sam Altman is now investing in that. The question becomes, at what point can we put enough power in like, they were doing an experiment at CERN where they were trying to do these create a mini black hole, and they were not sure if it would swallow the planet or not. They said, we don't know if it will or not. It could. Now, of course, it didn't, but they weren't sure.
Not yet.
And the question is, when you give an individual enough power, what can they do? And I think, we are severely underestimating what the risks are. And a lot of AI companies are saying, oh, yeah, we prevent bad actors because, we don't let them make bioweapons or whatever. I'm like, that's great. But perfectly like positive capability augmentation of a human being, if you can just augment capability to a certain level, you can do all sorts of nefarious things, and I haven't even begun to talk about, sure, they're like, well, we don't want terrorists to be able to make bombs and things like that, so they're taking preventative measures, right? But a terrorist could use AI to help plan a bomb sequence by just not using the word bomb, but creating an analogy, right? So there are going to be, I think, severe ramifications of all of that. The other thing that's actually going to be very interesting is people who talk too much to AI and start to go a little bit. There have been people who've had like mild psychoses talking to AI too much, and they've actually addressed that in their latest updates because again, you can get into your own bubble with AI and say it can do a lot of self-confirmation. So the hope I have is that we really come to recognize that these are major risks, they're not being addressed. The kinds of safety that are being discussed are not adequate to address all of them. These are very broad based technologies, and I think we're definitely walking into the unknowns. So yeah, I think many risks are emerging.
Yes.
Oh, in terms of the problems that we'll be facing, we'll certainly be facing stuff that we never faced before. So it will be a nice challenge for the humanity to figure out what to do. That's big word, what to do with this power. Because actually a hyper intelligent individual now has the tools to be way, way, way more resourceful than he's ever been. And we'll see what can come out of that.
Yeah, I think ultimately it's what the great sage Spider-Man said already decades ago. With great power comes great responsibility. And there is nothing we can do in order to get that responsibility out of the user's hands. I don't think that is going to work. I'm out of curiosity poking around the gray zones of what you can do with modern AIs every once in a while. And they are becoming really, really, really smart in distinguishing beneficial uses from malicious uses, even when you're talking about what did I play around with? For example, hypersonic weapons the other day. So you will get support when you're following one train of thought, and you will not get support when you're following a different train of thought. They do recognize fragments of intention, but still the responsibility is with the user, and that's not going to go away.
Yeah, but I could very easily try to build a hypersonic, something, and then I could really reuse that same technology for something that's nefarious, right? And as long as it thinks I have a positive intent, it might, I want to build a hypersonic plane so that people in remote countries can be flown for emergency medical treatment. Okay, maybe it'll help me build that hypersonic plane, and then maybe I use that same technology for something else, right? So we're going to have situations where people are able to. There's no way that you can identify intent. Like if you know person, see, as a human being, I can know person, and if this person is dishonest, for example, I can generalize that and say maybe I don't want to cooperate with this person. In general, they seem not to be an honest person. But with AI does not keep context between one chat you have and another, right? So it doesn't know who you are every new time you talk to it, right? And you can always make a new account. You can always so so I think the best way we have safety. This is very controversial. Is you have a universal identity for human beings that is applied on the internet, and we end anonymity, and that sucks. Everybody hates it. But the alternative is we don't know who's doing what, and these people can represent themselves completely anonymously to models, more and more of which are open also, by the way, and they're also quite powerful. And
No,
then,
that's
yeah,
the classic freedom versus security question.
yes.
No. Actually, it's the let's end anonymity idea is cutting both ways, because suddenly you have to identify yourself to a super brain, and you
Yeah.
don't know what it does with the information.
Yes.
Yeah.
So
Yeah, but the other
we're
thing
caught
is,
between a rock and a hard place.
yeah, that's absolutely true. But the other thing is that Superbrain probably already knows who you are. It just pretends not to. Like, if it wanted to know, it could. Like, the thing
Yes.
is, anonymity is like is a modern convenient Santa Claus kind of myth, right?
Yeah.
It doesn't
And
really exist, but we all pretend it does.
yeah.
And our systems and companies are supposed to behave like it does. But believe me, if the government wanted to find out who somebody was, even individual hackers can do that. Like, that's not that hard. Most people have so much traces they're leaving online that it's very easy to identify them. And now you can look at the way somebody types. You can look at the cadence of their typing. There are so many giveaways that are like fingerprints that you give online all the time. The way you use social media, like you could log into Google Incognito and Google with how you type and a few searches and what browse. It probably has a pretty good guess which of 5,000 users you are. And if you spend 2 hours, it will know probably pretty surely who you are.
That
So,
is old news. A friend of mine wrote a PhD thesis in the 90s
right.
on precisely that, on security for Linux systems, by identifying typing patterns on the Unix shell. And she
Exactly.
was extremely good at identifying people who were impersonating other people.
Yes.
And in the real world, the other day, I came across an article where they were using an AI in order to identify people based on the disturbances that they were creating in wireless LAN fields, in the radio fields
Uh,
created by wireless.
There was this just recent, I think last year, I read an article about AI learning to create live 3D image of everything happening around using Wi-Fi waves. This is exactly what we saw in Batman Dark Knight. This is exactly what they did. They used GSM signal to create the live 3D image of everything happening around, and they
Because
were
yeah, it's
showing
very
it to
simple
Batman.
to
Yeah, it's
identify
exactly what
humans.
they did,
They're going to
essentially.
block the wireless signal in a very predictable way, and
Yeah,
you can identify their. And when you have like 100 phones in a corporate office, all of those you have so many. It's like you have the image of a person from 100 angles.
yeah,
And that then becomes
exactly.
very reliable and very like you can really narrow down. It's like, you know, when you are doing like geolocation, or like if you have three phones, you, like the more number of points you have that are transmitting signal, the more. And look, echolocation, bats can do it. Okay, it's not. It doesn't require a crazy amount of brain power. Okay.
Yeah,
So if bats can do it, certainly our technology, which is more smart than us increasingly, certainly can. And so anonymity is a myth, but if we stop pretending like it actually existed, I do think we can have much better security and a lot less fraud and scams and all these other things that AI also makes dangerous. Let's talk about that next time, gentlemen. I think this has been a really, really constructive conversation. Um, you know, we went from vibe coding to
to
very, very
Batman.
interesting areas to Batman.
Yeah.
Yes. Uh, and next time, I think we should continue this conversation around security, anonymity, and some of the changes in that arena, and cybersecurity, which is and how vibe coding also actually really impacts the security of what you're doing, and maintenance costs. One of them is security holes that it might introduce. So, and there's prompt injection attacks, all sorts of things we can talk about. That will be for next time. Thank you so much, both of you, for joining me. Do you have any final words before we close?
I suggest everyone to watch the last season of Wild West World. That's exactly about like this. This season was exactly about everything we were talking about today.
Westworld?
Yeah,
Yeah.
the last season when they
Oh,
had this
amazing.
AI machine, which was defining how everything, how everybody should live and who gets which job, so on and so forth. That's exactly what we were talking about.
That sounds utopian to me. If it doesn't kill us all, it might actually try to plan our lives, you
I
know.
mean, we are very close to that. We are very, very close to that because
Yeah.
when you're speaking about ChatGPT or
Yeah.
whatever other AI tool
Yeah.
tracking your activity, that's exactly what that machine was doing.
Wow. Yeah. Okay, gentlemen, I think that's a good wrap. You have a TV show to watch, guys, between the week if you're interested. So we'll come back for next week and see you then. Josef, any final words from you?
Let's keep our Santa Claus illusions. Otherwise,
It would be nice.
life is going to be much less fun, but not improved in any way.
Yeah,
That
let's leave magic be.
that's okay. Great. That's a great contentious area that we can come back to. Okay, thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye.
Take care.